Have you ever wondered what happens if you put alcohol on pastels?
If the answer is no, neither did I, until a few days ago, when a sudden idea popped into my head, making me curious about how pastels would react to alcohol.
Now let's find out together. Pastels are great for blending and adding texture, but the big question is, can you do a better job by using alcohol?
That's where rubbing alcohol comes in. Today, I'll show you how to use it to totally change your soft pastels, making them work almost like watercolor. These are the materials you'll need: pastel paper, soft pastels, alcohol, brush or brushes, and cotton swabs. The rubbing alcohol turns the pastel pigment into a liquid. You can find it pretty easily, but if you don't have any at home, stop drinking so much vodka and use it for your drawings instead. It's better for everyone that way. Just kidding. But honestly, vodka can work as an alternative too. Brushes help apply the alcohol in a more controlled manner. Soft pastels provide a base with bright colors and textures. The pastel paper holds the liquid better without getting a wavy effect. What I mean by the wavy effect is those denivelations in the paper you get when you add too much water to a watercolor painting. Cotton swabs are perfect for detailed blending and some quick fixes. I will start by applying some soft pastels to the paper. You don't need to be precise, just go for it, but make sure you apply enough pigment from the start. I'm doing a basic gradient with yellow at one end, blue at the other, and a few colors in between. Feel free to experiment with any colors or shapes you like.
Keep in mind that using alcohol can affect the preservation quality of the pastels. The alcohol may change the structure of the pastel pigments, which may reduce their durability. It can also weaken the binding agents, making the work a bit less stable over time.
Here's where the fun begins. Let's dip the brush into the rubbing alcohol and see what happens when I apply it to the pastel. As soon as the alcohol touches the pastel, I can tell the pigment becomes liquid, almost like watercolor. It smooths out the texture and blends the colors beautifully, creating an effect impossible to achieve with only pastels. This technique can be very tricky. The colors mix and flow together, almost like painting with pastels, but the pigment tends to move around a lot on the paper. You can control the blending by adjusting the alcohol, but less alcohol keeps the colors too separate, and too much makes everything a bit too fluid and watery. It looks fine, but the pigment can be hard to manage. I try to keep adding pigment and alcohol over the previous layers, but unfortunately, after about the third layer, I noticed the paper's texture started to break down and everything turned into a big mess. It seems like the alcohol eats away at the paper's texture or softens it, and when I try to add another layer, I actually scrape off part of the paper's texture and move it around. Maybe I should have waited longer for it to dry, but I think the result would be the same. You just can't build up as many layers using alcohol as you can with regular pastel sticks and blending tools. What I find strange is that after it fully dries, it looks somewhat okay, so I think it might depend on the type of pastels you're using, their quality, the color, how much pigment you put on the paper, how much alcohol you apply, and maybe other factors too. It all really depends on how well you can manage the alcohol and what effect you're trying to achieve with it. For me, this was more out of curiosity, just to see what would happen. It's not like I plan to use this method on every new drawing from now on. To see how the alcohol reacts on a larger surface, I'm reusing an old drawing and testing how the background looks after applying alcohol to it. I want to mention that this drawing won't be sold, it's just a personal project, so if the colors fade over time because of the alcohol, no harm is done. I'll admit, I was a little nervous before doing this, worried I might ruin the drawing. What exactly happened? It looks like a kid was playing with watercolors, to be frank. I also had to be really careful when applying the alcohol around the main subject to avoid touching the pigment on the dog and changing its texture. Luckily, that didn't happen. To be honest, I'm not too thrilled with how it looks. It's interesting, to put it nicely, but I don't think I'd try it again, especially not on a background. It was fun and exciting to experiment, but I don't think it looks better than it did before, to be honest, as you can probably tell. Once the alcohol was dry, which only takes up to a few minutes, I went back in on the previous swatch to add sharp details on top of the soft, blended base. Look at how clean and crisp the lines are. I was expecting the layers to eat the pencil's lid or the marks not to be so visible, but I was pleasantly surprised. This might be great for landscapes or portraits where you want a soft background but sharp, realistic details in the foreground. Now, going back to my large section test, here you can see that, honestly, my drawing got ruined, mostly the background. It looks kind of muddy and messy. Maybe I did something wrong, like using too much alcohol or not having enough pigment on the old drawing, but it doesn't really look like anything now. When I used this technique on smaller areas, it worked better, but on large areas like this, the pigment just spreads everywhere, and honestly, it breaks my heart a little. I'm not saying it's not worth trying for yourself, but in my case, it wasn't worth ruining that beautiful effect created by the pastels, which I love, by adding alcohol and ending up with a bunch of smudges.
Now let's discuss some tips and tricks.
Use a cotton swab to wipe away excess alcohol or create textures. This tool also gives you more control over your artwork. Right now, I'm using a cotton swab to lift some pastel pigment. It's a great way to add highlights or texture, especially in places like clouds or water reflections. Try playing around with different amounts of alcohol. It can totally change the look of your art. If you use less, you'll get sharper edges, which can make certain areas pop. If you use more, the colors will blend together in a softer, smoother way, almost like a dreamy effect. Just experiment with it and see what you like best. Take your time and have fun with it. You might end up finding some cool new effects that you were not expecting. Use a sponge to apply alcohol to larger areas. This can help cover more space quickly and give a more uniform look, especially for backgrounds. I have not tried this yet, but it sounds like something very helpful. Do keep in mind that sponges can absorb a large quantity of liquids quite fast, so be careful. If your studio or the space where you create is small and you use this alcohol often, I recommend opening the window from time to time to let in some fresh air and keep things safe.
From what I have observed, I came to the conclusion that this was a very fun and interesting experiment for me, and I had no idea what results to accept when I first started this experiment. But now I know. Maybe for craft projects or personal pieces where you might want to mix different styles, this technique might work, but for a realistic drawing, I don't think it's ideal. Except for small, less visible areas where you can always add another pigment on top to hide those imperfections in case something goes bad. Now that you know what the cool trick is, I challenge you to try it on your own art and see if it works or not for you. If you do try it, please make sure to comment and let me know how it went, because I really want to hear it. As usual, please give my video a thumbs up if you liked it, and if you want to be the first to hear about every new video I post, you can hit that bell notification and you are going to be notified every time I upload a new tutorial. If you want to see more videos from me in the future, you can also subscribe to my channel. I post a tutorial every week and you don't want to miss that. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video as well.